I wish you would just stop interfering with my life." My daughter said it so calmly that for a few seconds I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. We were sitting across from each other at a small Italian restaurant in Düsseldorf. Outside, rain was sliding down the windows, turning the streetlights into long yellow lines. I had just asked her one simple question: "How are you going to pay for the apartment next month?" She put down her fork. "I'll figure it out." "With what?" She looked at me. Then she said the sentence that changed everything: "With my own money, like a normal adult." I stared at her. My daughter Lena was 26 years old, and for the first time in her life, she looked at me as if I were a problem she needed to remove. If you enjoy real lifestyle stories about family, betrayal, and unexpected justice, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because what happened next was something I never imagined I would have to do to my own daughter. My name is Thomas. I was 58 at the time, and I had spent most of my adult life working as an electrical engineer. I wasn't rich. At least, I never thought of myself that way. I lived in the same 3-bedroom apartment I had bought almost 20 years earlier. I drove an 8-year-old Volkswagen. I still compared supermarket prices before buying coffee, but I had one thing many people didn't have. I had saved carefully, quietly. For years, my wife, Anna, had died when Lena was 19. After that, my entire world became very small. It was just Lena and me. I cooked dinner for her. I drove her to university when her train was cancelled. I sat beside her when she cried over her first serious breakup. When she graduated, I was sitting in the front row, and when she told me she had been offered a job in Düsseldorf, I helped her find an apartment. At the beginning, she didn't ask me for much, just the deposit, then the first month's rent. Then a few months later, she called me one evening. "Dad?" I knew that voice. "What happened?" "I have a problem." It was always a problem. Her washing machine had broken. Her electricity bill was higher than expected. Her car needed repairs. Her employer had delayed a payment. Every problem seemed small, and because I had the money, I solved it. That's what parents do, isn't it? At least that's what I told myself. The first time I transferred her 600, I didn't think twice. The next time it was 900, then 200. Eventually, I started paying her rent directly. I never announced it. I never reminded her. I never said, "You owe me." I wanted her to feel secure. That was my mistake. Security slowly became expectation. Expectation became entitlement. And entitlement became something I didn't recognize until it was already too late. By the time Lena was 26, I was paying almost everything: her rent, her car insurance, her phone, her health insurance contribution, several subscriptions, her gym membership, and, without realizing it, a large part of her social life: weekend trips, costs, concert tickets, even a credit card bill that I had originally agreed to help with for only 3 months. 3 months became a year, then another. Whenever I mentioned money, she had the same answer: "Dad, you're making it sound worse than it is." So I stopped talking about it. That evening at the restaurant, however, something had changed. She wasn't embarrassed anymore. She wasn't apologizing. She was angry, and strangely enough, that hurt more. I leaned back in my chair. "Lena, I'm not trying to interfere with your life." "Yes, you are. I asked you how you're going to pay your rent." "Exactly." She picked up her phone. "You always have to know everything. I've been paying your rent for almost 2 years. And?" I blinked. "And?" "Yes," she sighed. "You offered to help me." "I did. So why do you keep using it against me?" "I've never used it against you. You don't have to." She looked out the window. "Every time we talk about my life, you somehow bring up money." I felt something tighten in my chest. "I bring up money because I'm paying for your life." She looked back at me, then she smiled, not warmly, almost sadly. "See? See what? This," she pointed between us. "This is exactly why I can't breathe around you." I didn't know what to say. The waiter came over and asked if everything was okay. Lena smiled immediately. "Everything's fine." The waiter walked away. Her smile disappeared. You think because Mom died, and you raised me alone, you get to control everything I do. My hand stopped halfway toward my glass. I never said that. You don't have to say it. Lena, I need you to understand something. She leaned forward. You are ruining my life. The restaurant suddenly seemed very quiet. I could hear the sound of plates from another table. Someone laughed near the bar. A glass broke in the kitchen. But all I could hear was her sentence. You are ruining my life. I looked at my daughter and tried to find the little girl I remembered. The girl who used to run into my arms when I picked her up from kindergarten. The teenager who once sat on the kitchen floor at midnight because she was afraid she had failed an exam. The 19-year-old who had held my hand at her mother's funeral. I couldn't find any of them. There was only a grown woman sitting across from me, telling me that my help had become the reason she couldn't live. I swallowed. What exactly do you want from me? She answered immediately. Nothing. Nothing? I want you to trust me? I nodded slowly. Okay. She looked surprised. Okay? Yes. I reached for my wallet. She frowned. What are you doing? Paying the bill. I can pay. I know. I placed my card on the table. Then I looked at her. From now on, you can. She stared at me. For the first time that evening, she looked uncertain. What does that mean? It means exactly what you said. I stood up. You want to live your own life, yes. Then live it. She didn't respond. I walked outside alone. The rain had become heavier. I stood under the restaurant's awning and watched cars pass through the wet street. I expected to feel angry. I didn't. I felt empty. On the drive home, I kept replaying the conversation. You are ruining my life. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had made her too dependent on me. Maybe helping her had prevented her from becoming independent. But there was another thought that wouldn't leave me alone. If I was really ruining her life, why had she become so comfortable with the life I was paying for? The next morning, I made coffee and opened my laptop. I pulled up my bank statements. For the first time, I looked at everything. Not emotionally, not as a father, as an accountant. I created a spreadsheet: rent, insurance, car, subscriptions, credit card, travel, restaurants, shopping, mixed miscellaneous transfers. I added everything together. Then I stared at the number, euro 4,730. That was what I had spent on Lena the previous month. My hand stayed on the mouse. I checked it again. Euro 4,030. For 1 month, I opened the previous month. Euro 4,210 the month before that. 4,680. I went back 6 months. The average was almost 4,500. I leaned back in my chair. For years, I had told myself that I was simply helping my daughter. But this wasn't helping anymore. This was financing an entire lifestyle. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were several payments I didn't recognize. One was for 1,280, another was 760, and another was 1,950. All had been transferred to the same account. A company. I clicked on the transaction details. The company name meant nothing to me. I searched through my emails, nothing. I checked the dates. The payments had started nearly 8 months earlier. 8 months. I sat there in silence. Lena had never mentioned them. I called my bank, not to accuse anyone, but simply to understand what the payments were. The employee explained that the transfers had been authorized through a recurring payment arrangement. I ended the call. Then I called Lena. She answered after 3 rings. Hi, Dad. Her voice sounded completely normal. Lena, I need to ask you something. What? Do you know a company called Rhinehouse Living? There was silence. Only 2 seconds. But I noticed it. Yes, what is it? Why? I'm looking at several payments to them. Another silence, then she said, It's nothing. Nothing? It's just something I'm dealing with. What are you dealing with? Dad, I don't have time for this right now. You have 3s. 990 going to them over the last few months. Her voice changed. You went through my bank-related payments. I'm looking at my bank account. You shouldn't be monitoring me. I'm not monitoring you. You are. Lena, I need to know what I'm paying for. You're not paying for it. I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. I think I am. She hung up. I sat there for a long time. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Lena. "Don't come to my apartment. Don't ask questions. I'll handle it." I read it twice. Something was wrong, but I still wasn't prepared for what I discovered 2 days later, because Lena had forgotten one important thing. I had access to an old email account she had once used for university applications. She had given me the password years earlier. I had never opened it until that afternoon, and buried inside that account was an email that changed the entire story. The sender was Rhinehouse Living. The subject line was simple: "Final notice. Outstanding balance." I opened it, and slowly, as I read the details, I realized that the money I had been sending my daughter wasn't being used to support the life she had described to me. It was being used to protect a secret she had been hiding for months. And suddenly, our dinner conversation made sense. She hadn't been angry because I was controlling her. She had been afraid I would discover the truth. I kept reading. Then I reached the final paragraph, and I realized that stopping her money was no longer about teaching my daughter a lesson. It was about protecting myself before someone else's secret destroyed both of us. The final paragraph of the email was only 3 sentences long, but those 3 sentences made my hands go cold. Rhinehouse Living was demanding immediate payment of 18,600. If the amount wasn't paid within 14 days, they would begin legal collection proceedings against the person named on the agreement. That person was not Lena, it was me. I read the name again, Thomas Weber. My name. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then I checked the date. The agreement had been signed 8 months earlier. 8 months, the same month, those strange payments had started leaving my account. I printed the email. Then I printed the attached agreement. I sat at the kitchen table with the papers spread in front of me. There was my signature. At least, it looked like my signature, but I knew immediately that I had never signed that document. The agreement was for a furnished luxury apartment in central Dusseldorf. The monthly cost was 3,100. There was also a furniture package, cleaning service, parking space, and several other fees. The total was far more than Lena could afford, but the strange thing was this: the apartment wasn't the one Lena lived in. I knew her address. I had visited her several times. Her apartment was a normal 2-bedroom place in a quieter neighborhood. This contract was for an apartment almost twice as expensive. I called the company. A woman answered. "Rhinehouse Living. Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Weber. I received a final payment notice from you." There was a pause. "Of course, Mr. Weber. Let me bring up your account." I waited. Dot Kobe sounds came through the phone. "Yes, I see the agreement. I never signed it." Another pause. "I believe the contract was completed electronically." "By whom?" "By the person listed as the authorized tenant." "Who is that?" "Mrs. Lena Weber, my daughter." I closed my eyes. "Why is my name on the financial guarantee?" "I can't discuss the details without reviewing the contract." "You just said my name is on it." "Yes." "Then I'm asking you to send me every document associated with my name." The woman became more careful. "I can send a request form." "Do that." After the call, I sat there staring at the wall. I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. There had to be another explanation. Maybe Lena had signed something without understanding it. Maybe someone had used my information without her knowing. Maybe it was a mistake. I wanted one of those explanations, because the alternative was much harder to accept. My daughter had used my identity to guarantee an apartment she had never told me about. And the money I had been sending her wasn't going toward her ordinary expenses. It was paying for a second life. I called her again. She didn't answer. I sent one message. "We need to talk today." No response. I waited an hour. Then another. At 6:17 p.m. she finally replied. "I told you I would handle it. Please leave me alone." I stared at the screen. I typed 3 different responses, deleted all of them. Finally, I wrote, "I know about the apartment." The typing indicator appeared almost immediately, then disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Nothing came. I waited. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Lena," I answered. "Where did you find that?" Her voice was quiet. "Find what?" "You know what. The contract." Silence. "Yes, Dad. Why is my name on it?" She breathed out slowly. "I was going to tell you. When? I don't know. After they took everything. It wasn't like that. Then tell me how it was." She didn't answer. I stood beside the kitchen window. Outside, the street was dark. "I need the truth, Lena. I made a mistake." "What kind of mistake cost 18,600? It wasn't supposed to get this far." "What wasn't?" "The apartment. Why did you rent it?" She started crying, not loudly, just small, broken breaths. And despite everything, my first instinct was still to comfort her. That was the worst part. I was still her father, even when she had lied to me. Some part of me wanted to say, "It's okay, we'll fix it." But I forced myself to stay silent. Finally, she said, "I thought I could make it work." "What does that mean?" "I wanted a better place." "You already had an apartment. I hated it." "You never told me that, because you would have said no." I looked down at the contract. "So you used my name because you thought I would say no?" "No." "Then why?" "Because I knew you'd help me." There it was, not an apology, not an explanation, just the truth. She had counted on me, not because I had promised, because I had always rescued her. I sat down. "Who lives in the apartment?" Another silence. "Lena, my boyfriend." I frowned. "What boyfriend?" "Daniel." I had heard the name once or twice. A man she had met through work. She had never introduced us properly. "Daniel lives there. Sometimes." "Sometimes. Mostly." "Then why am I paying for his apartment?" "It's not his apartment. Who pays for his expenses?" "He's between jobs." I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because suddenly everything was painfully clear. The expensive apartment, the restaurants, the trips, the new furniture, the payments. I had thought I was supporting my daughter. I was supporting 2 adults, and one of them hadn't even bothered to meet me. "Does Daniel know I'm paying?" She didn't answer. "Lena, yes." That one word hurt more than I expected. "He knows." "Yes." "Does he know the contract is in my name?" "I think so." I stood up. "You think so? He knows I needed a guarantor. That's not what I asked. He knows." I walked away from the phone and stared at the floor. For years I had protected Lena from consequences. Now I understood that I had also protected her from reality. If she spent too much, I covered it. If she made a mistake, I fixed it. If something went wrong, I transferred money. She had learned something from that. Not that her father loved her. She had learned that consequences were temporary. Someone else would always pay. I finally said, "I'm cancelling everything." Her breathing stopped. "What?" "Every payment." "Dad, don't. You told me you wanted independence. That doesn't mean you stop helping me." "That's exactly what it means. You can't do this." "I can." "No, you can't." Her voice became angry again. "You know what the problem with you is?" I said nothing. "You think money gives you the right to punish people." "No. You're doing this because you're angry." "Yes," I said. She went silent. I continued. "But I'm also doing it because you were right." "What?" "You said I was ruining your life." I looked at the contract. Maybe I was. "Dad, so I'm stepping out. You can't just abandon me. I am not abandoning you." "You are." "No, Lena." My voice was quieter than hers. "I'm stopping the payments. There's a difference." She started crying again. "Please." That word almost broke me. Almost. Then she said, "If you do this, I'll lose everything." I closed my eyes, and I realized something. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the lifestyle I had created. "I hope you don't lose everything," I said. "I hope you finally find out what is actually yours." Then I ended the call. That night, I cancelled every recurring payment. The rent, the phone, the subscriptions, the gym, the insurance contributions, the credit card transfers. Everything. I didn't transfer another euro. I also called my bank and told them that I disputed the contract associated with Rhine House Living. They opened an investigation. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't want revenge. I wanted protection. The lawyer reviewed the documents carefully. Did you authorize your daughter to sign this? No. Did you give her access to your identification documents? Years ago, for university paperwork. Do you know how she obtained the electronic signature? No. He nodded. Then don't confront her about the legal details yet. Why? Because we need evidence before we make accusations. That sentence stayed with me. Evidence. For the first time, I stopped thinking like a father trying to save his daughter. I started thinking like someone protecting his future. The lawyer helped me request the original electronic records from the company. That included the timestamp, IP information, verification process, and copies of the identification documents used during registration. I waited. 3 days later, the company responded. I opened the email at my kitchen table. The document contained the verification details. The contract had been completed from a device registered to Lena. The identity document used was a scanned copy of my passport. My passport, a copy I had given Lena years earlier. I felt sick, but then I noticed something else. The electronic signature had been completed using a phone number, not mine, Lena's. That meant she hadn't accidentally used my information. She had knowingly used it. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. He called me later that afternoon. Mr. Weber, there's one more thing. What? The contract isn't the biggest problem. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? There are several other financial agreements attached to your name. I sat down. How many? 3 that we've found so far. 3, yes. What are they? 2 consumer loans and 1 credit account. I couldn't speak. How much? He gave me the total, almost 27,000. My hands began to shake. The 18,600 apartment debt wasn't the whole story. It was only the part I had discovered first. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing every document. The pattern became obvious. Lena had been borrowing money. She had been using my information to guarantee or support some of it. And my monthly transfers had been helping her keep up with the payments. But then I found something that made no sense. One of the loans had been used for a business, a small online fashion company. The company name was listed as Lena Weber Design. I had never heard of it. I searched the registration details. The business existed. But there was another person listed in the documents, Daniel, my daughter's unemployed boyfriend. I stared at his name. Suddenly, the story changed again. Maybe Lena hadn't simply been living beyond her means. Maybe she had been financing a business that was failing, a business that I had unknowingly been paying for. I called Lena. This time she answered immediately. Dad, did you start a company with Daniel? Silence. Then, who told you? So you did. It's complicated. No. I looked at the papers on my desk. It isn't complicated anymore. You don't understand. Then, explain it, she cried. Daniel had an idea. What kind of idea? He wanted to start an online clothing brand. And you funded it? We both did. With my money? No. Then why are there loans in my name? She didn't answer. Lena, I was going to pay them back. When? When the business worked. And did it? Silence. No. I leaned back. How much money did you lose? She whispered a number. I had to ask her to repeat it. She did. My heart sank. It was over $40,000. I sat there in silence. Then I asked the question I should have asked months earlier. Why didn't you tell me? She began sobbing. Because I knew you'd be disappointed. No. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me. You didn't tell me because you knew I would stop you. She didn't deny it. And that was when something inside me finally broke. Not my anger, my hope. The hope that this was simply a phase. The hope that my daughter was just struggling. The hope that if I gave her enough support, she would eventually become independent. She wasn't going to become independent while I kept removing every consequence. I said, I'm not angry anymore. She stopped crying. What? I'm done being angry. What are you going to do? I looked at the papers. I don't know yet, but I did know one thing. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to threaten her. I wasn't going to expose her to everyone she knew, and I wasn't going to destroy her life. I was going to do something much simpler. I was going to let the truth stand on its own. The next morning, I received another email from Rhinehouse Living. They had reviewed my dispute. They were willing to temporarily suspend collection, but they needed me to attend a meeting. I agreed. At the meeting, they showed me the original contract. Then they showed me something I had never seen before. A second document. It was an authorization form, and at the bottom was my signature. Except this time, I knew exactly what it was. It wasn't my signature, it was a copy taken from an old document and digitally placed onto the form. Someone had taken my signature. Someone had built a financial life around it. And as I stared at the page, I realized there was only one person who had access to everything needed to do it, my daughter. But there was still one question I couldn't answer. Why had Daniel needed my identity at all? And that question became even more important when, that same evening, I received an anonymous message. There was no name, no profile picture, just one sentence. Your daughter isn't the person you should be worried about. And underneath it was a photograph. A photograph of Daniel standing outside the luxury apartment. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was a woman I had never seen before. And in her hand was a folder containing documents with my name on them. That was the moment I realized Lena might not have been the mastermind behind everything. She might have been hiding something. But someone else had been pulling the strings. And I was about to find out exactly who. I stared at the photograph for almost a minute. The woman standing beside Daniel looked familiar, not because I had met her, because I had seen her name before. I opened the documents on my desk and searched through the company records. There it was, Sophie Keller. She was listed as an external business consultant for Lena and Daniel's company. But the more I looked, the stranger it became. Sophie wasn't just a consultant. She had been involved in almost every financial document. The business registration, the apartment agreement, the loans, the payment arrangements. And, according to the documents, she had witnessed several electronic signatures. I called my lawyer. I think I know who Sophie Keller is. He listened while I explained. Don't contact her, he said. Why? Because if she is involved, you don't know what she might do with the information you give her. What should I do? Let us investigate. For the first time in weeks, I followed someone's advice without arguing. I handed everything over. The anonymous photograph, the contracts, the loan documents, the payment history, everything. 2 days later, my lawyer called. I found something. I was sitting at my kitchen table. What? Sophie Keller previously worked with another company owned by Daniel. Another company? Yes. What happened to it? It closed. Why? Debt. I looked out the window, so this wasn't Daniel's first business. No, did Lena know? Probably. Probably isn't good enough. I know. He paused. There's more. I waited. The previous company had unpaid debts connected to Daniel. Sophie was involved in restructuring those debts. My stomach tightened. So they knew how to move money around. That's what it looks like. I looked at the photograph again. And Lena. She appears to have been used as the person with the clean financial history. I said nothing. That sentence hurt because it meant my daughter might have been manipulated. But manipulation didn't erase responsibility. She had still used my name. She had still lied. She had still allowed me to believe that I was simply helping her with rent and everyday expenses. The next day, Lena came to my apartment. She looked exhausted. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were red. She stood outside my door with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked into the living room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, Dad, I'm sorry. I looked at her. For what? She started crying. For everything. I didn't hug her. Not because I didn't love her, because I knew that if I did, I might go back to being the father who solved everything. And I couldn't do that anymore. I sat down. She remained standing. I should have told you. Yes. I was scared of what? That you'd think I was stupid. I already knew you were struggling. She wiped her face. I thought Daniel could make the business work. And Sophie, her expression changed just slightly. But I saw it. You know about Sophie? Yes, Lena sat down. She's the one who helped us set everything up. Everything. The company, the financing, the apartment. Why did she need my information? Lena looked at the floor. She said it was normal. Using your father's identity. She said you had agreed to support me financially. I never agreed to any of this, I know. Then why did you sign? She started crying again. Because I thought I could fix it before you ever found out. That answer sounded painfully honest. I leaned forward. What happened to the money? She hesitated. Most of it went into the business. Most? She looked at me. Daniel took some. I don't know. You don't know. He said he needed it for supply eyes. And did you check? No. Why? Because I trusted him. I nodded slowly. There it was, the pattern. She had trusted Daniel. I had trusted Lena. And both of us had trusted people who knew exactly how to use that trust. Where is Daniel now? I don't know. When did you last see him? Yesterday. What did he say? He told me I should stop talking to you. I looked at her. Why? He said you were dangerous. I almost smiled. Dangerous? He said you would destroy everything. I stood up. Lena, I'm not trying to destroy your life. I know. I'm trying to stop someone from destroying mine. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. Dad, I need your help. I took a breath. The old version of me would have said yes immediately. Instead, I asked, what kind of help? I need somewhere to stay. Why? Daniel took the keys to the apartment. I stared at her. Where are you living? I've been staying with a friend. Why did he take the keys? Because the apartment lease is in your name. That was the moment everything became clear. Daniel wasn't simply avoiding debt. He was trying to control the apartment, and if the contract remained active, the consequences could eventually reach me. I looked at my daughter. You can stay here for a few nights. She nodded. But there are conditions. She looked surprised. What conditions? No money, she swallowed. Okay. No new loans? Okay. No contact with Daniel unless your lawyer is present. She looked at me, then nodded. And you tell me everything. She was silent. Everything, Lena. Finally, she said, okay. That was the first honest agreement we'd had in a long time. Over the next week, the truth came out piece by piece. Lena had met Daniel nearly 2 years earlier. He was charming, confident, always talking about business. He told her he had contacts in the fashion industry and knew how to build an online brand quickly. At first, the business seemed legitimate. They ordered small quantities of clothing. They created a website. They ran advertisements. They made a few sales. Then Daniel wanted to expand. He convinced Lena they needed a larger apartment for storing inventory and meeting potential suppliers. That was the luxury apartment, but the business never grew as expected. Instead, expenses increased. Daniel borrowed money, then more money, when lenders started asking questions. Sophie suggested using Lena's family connection as financial security. Lena told Sophie that her father had money. Sophie asked for documents. Lena gave her copies. That was the first line she crossed. The second was signing the apartment agreement. The third was allowing loans to be attached to my identity. The fourth was staying silent. But there was something even worse. Daniel had been moving money from the company into a separate account. His account. Lena discovered it only after the business started collapsing. When she confronted him, he told her it was temporary. Then he disappeared. And that was why Lena had been desperately trying to keep up with payments. Not because she wanted luxury, because she was terrified of being exposed. I listened to everything. I was angry, but I was also tired, very tired. One evening, Lena sat across from me at the kitchen table. I looked at her. No. She looked down. I think I hate what you did. Her eyes filled with tears. But I don't hate you, she nodded. I don't deserve you, no. She looked up. I continued. You don't deserve someone who keeps rescuing you. She was quiet. You deserve someone who tells you the truth. That was the hardest sentence I had ever said to my daughter. Because for years I thought love meant protecting her from pain. I finally understood that sometimes love means refusing to protect someone from the consequences of their own choices. The legal process took several weeks. The bank investigated the suspicious agreements. Rhinehouse suspended the collection against me while the dispute was reviewed. The loans were formally challenged. My lawyer provided evidence showing that the documents had been created using my personal information without my authorization. Sophie stopped answering calls. Daniel disappeared completely. But then something unexpected happened. The anonymous person who had sent me the photograph contacted me again. This time, the message contained several files, bank statements, company records, and a series of messages between Daniel and Sophie. I opened them with my lawyer beside me. The messages revealed the entire plan. Daniel had been struggling financially before he met Lena. Sophie knew. They had deliberately approached Lena because she had access to family money. They knew I regularly helped her. They didn't need to convince me directly. They only needed Lena to believe that everything would eventually work out. One message from Daniel to Sophie was dated 8 months earlier. It said, "Her father will keep paying. He always does." I stared at that sentence. It hurt more than any insult Lena had ever given me, because it was true. He knew me. He had never even met me. But he knew exactly how I worked. I would pay, I would forgive, I would rescue. I would keep quiet, until there was nothing left to rescue. The final piece of evidence came from a bank transfer. Daniel had moved a large amount of company money into an account controlled by Sophie. That money had then been transferred overseas. The authorities became involved. I didn't have to confront either of them. I didn't have to threaten anyone. I didn't have to expose them publicly. The evidence did the work. Months passed. The financial claims against me were eventually cleared. The apartment contract was cancelled. The unauthorized debts connected to my identity were removed after the investigation confirmed that I had not authorized them. I lost some money during the process. Legal fees, administrative costs, time, but I kept my home. More importantly, I got my life back. Lena moved out of my apartment after 3 weeks. She rented a small room. She found a second job. She sold her car. She cancelled every unnecessary subscription. For the first time since she was 19, she was living within her own means. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hers. Months later, we met for coffee. She arrived 20 minutes early. She was wearing an old coat I remembered from university. She smiled. "You look tired," I said. "So do you." I laughed. "I probably deserve it." She shook her head. "No." We sat quietly for a moment. Then she said, "I have something for you." She took an envelope from her bag. Inside was a bank transfer receipt. 500. I looked at her. "What is this?" "The first payment." "For what?" She smiled sadly. "The money I owe you." I shook my head. "You don't have to pay me back." "Yes, I do." "Lena." "No." She looked directly at me. "You taught me that actions have consequences." I didn't know what to say. She continued, "I don't want to spend the rest of my life saying I was manipulated." She took a breath. "I made choices too." I nodded. "That matters." She looked down at her coffee. "Do you know what I finally understood?" "What?" "I wasn't angry because you controlled me." She paused. "I was angry because you made it possible for me to avoid becoming an adult." I looked at her. That was the first time I believed she understood. Not because she was crying. Not because she apologized, because she had changed something. She was paying her own rent, working 2 jobs, managing her own bills, and, most importantly, she had stopped asking me to fix things. Our relationship didn't magically return to what it had been. There were still uncomfortable conversations. There were still moments when I remembered the documents with my forged signature. There were still nights when I wondered how my daughter could have done something like that. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant deciding that the worst thing she had ever done would not become the only thing I ever saw when I looked at her. About a year after everything happened, I received a letter. It was from Lena. She had started a small online business again. This time it was completely different. No loans, no luxury apartment, no Daniel, no Sophie. Just a small rented workspace, a few products, and money she had actually earned. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "I used to think you stopped loving me when you stopped paying for my life. Now I understand that was the moment you finally loved me enough to let me build one." I read that sentence several times. Then I put the letter in a drawer. I didn't frame it. I didn't need to, because the truth was, stopping Lena's lifestyle had never been about revenge. Not really, at the beginning. I wanted her to feel the consequences of what she had said to me. But eventually, I realized something more important. The best revenge wasn't making my daughter suffer. It was refusing to be used again. It was protecting my future without destroying hers. It was allowing the truth to reach the people responsible. And it was learning that saying no to someone you love doesn't always mean you love them less. Sometimes it means you finally love them enough to stop lying to both of you. Today, Lena and I still talk, not every day, not like befalls. I don't immediately ask, "Do you need money?" I ask, "How are you?" And I'm okay. I believe her, because now, if she isn't okay, she knows how to handle it herself. And that is worth more to me than every euro I ever spent. Looking back, I still remember that night in the restaurant, the rain on the windows, the untouched food, her words, "You are ruining my life." At the time, I thought those words were the beginning of the end of our relationship. I was wrong. They were the beginning of the end of the version of our relationship that was built on dependence. I didn't stop loving my daughter. I stopped financing her choices. And that difference changed both of our lives. Sometimes, the hardest thing a parent can do is stop opening the door every time their child runs toward them with another problem. Not because the parent doesn't care, but because eventually the child has to learn how to open their own door. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't making someone pay. It's simply taking your own power back. If this story made you think about the difference between helping someone and enabling them, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories about family, betrayal, consequences, and second chances.